Both tall. Good heavens. What the hell was that? This meeting is being recorded. It's like, I
I
should
know.
probably hope so too. That was really loud. It's like someone shouting in my ear, "You're being recorded!"
You need to know, right?
Yeah, okay. For legal reasons. Never used
Probably.
to do that.
I know. I can't sneakily record you a lot now,
No.
and all your deepest, darkest secrets that you tell me before we start recording.
Hey, I
Anyway,
don't have deep, dark secrets. Mine are all light and breezy. Fuck off, you. She's laughing at me. Oh, I swore then, didn't I? We were recording.
yeah, it's fine. I
That's
don't see anyone cares.
okay.
I suppose I should introduce you, or actually, you can
Yeah.
introduce yourself if you like.
Well, go on then.
Hmm.
My name is Brian O'Gorman. I am a horror writer. I am most famous for my books Dawn of the Spiders, Day of the Spiders, and Night of the Spiders. I'm also famous for falling down in a chippy some 30 years ago and dropping chips and gravy on my own head, which I recently won an award for, funnily enough. And had I known I was going to be given an award for such an event, I would probably have done a somersault as well. But this is me. I write scary books, and sometimes I write nice things as well, but not often.
But that isn't the reason you're here today, is it? You're here
No,
to talk
it's
about your new book.
well, I am. Yes, I've written a memoir of my journey through mental health and having bipolar disorder for years. And I was people were on at me to write a book about mental health, and it's like I finally got around to doing it. Combined with obviously the last time we spoke, Donna, you asked me the question. You've had all these things happen to you. Why don't you write a book about it? So, I combine the two things together because people are asking me to write a book about mental health and the journey that I'd been on, and you asked me to write a book full of daft stories about me falling over and ending up with a wooden fork in my top pocket. So, so I have combined the two, and it's out on the 9th of July, and it's called "The Man Who Loved Spiders: A Memoir of Mental Health." So that's why I'm here.
And I can't wait. And I know that quite a lot of people have pre-ordered it so far, actually, haven't they? Or I think they have, unless they were lying.
No, no, quite a high amount of pre-orders. Yeah, it's sort of joint first place with the Day of the Spiders for pre-orders, which was an anticipated sequel. So this is right up there with the anticipated sequel. So let's see. We'll see what happens.
So if anyone didn't watch you last time, which would be criminal, and they should go do that. But if they didn't, do you want to tell briefly about your journey?
Well, I'd sort of suffered with mental health problems for years, but didn't actually realise what was going on. Um, and it started. I remember the first sort of real significant event happening when I was about 14 years of age, when I got plunged into this horrible, dark depression, and it just went on and on for months and months and months. And it was I just couldn't, not whatever I did, I just couldn't sort of break out of it. And because I'd never heard of the term mental health or depression or anything like that, because this was back in the sort of in the day, in the sort of late 1980s, where it wasn't really talked about. It wasn't really a thing. You just sort of heard stories about people going crazy and all that, but you did it, what mental health wasn't ever talked about, let alone the sort of subcategories of mental health conditions. And so I had no idea what was going on, and nobody else seemed to sort of notice really. They just thought, oh well, he's just a troubled teenager, and it's like it was just going on and on and on. And of course, eventually it kind of lifted. But by then, I was so disillusioned with everything that, with school and, I sort of withdrew into this sort of weird fantasy world. Which, I mean, you read about this in the book, but it's like I, I wanted to be a musician, That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do a conventional job or career or anything like that. I was just completely focused on I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna be a musician and I'm gonna be really famous, and then everybody will eat their words and they won't tease me anymore for being a miserable sod. So, and that's what they did. They teased me horrendously at school because I was just glum all the time and I didn't want to sort of engage with anybody. So this went on and on for years. And it was only when I was 37 years of age that I actually got a reason as to why all this was happening. And it was after I'd been divorced twice. Bless you. I've been divorced twice over the years, and um, after the sort of second divorce, I was living on my own, and I was again. fell into this horrible spiraling pit of depression. And my second ex-wife was a horrendous human being who played mind games and all this, but it culminated with me trying to take my own life. Um, I went off to Blackpool, and because I'm not going to commit suicide at home because that's just I don't want to mess the house up. So I took myself off to I booked a bed and breakfast in Blackpool, and I took myself off, and I had like 2 months supply of antidepressants which they were feeding me, which actually made my condition worse. You're not supposed to give people with bipolar disorder antidepressants because it accelerates the condition. So I had this big bag of pills, and I went out on one last huge bender, all the way down Blackpool front, going from pub to club to, you know, getting absolutely hammered, and it's like one last final cruise, before I popped off the mortal coil, and then went back to the B&B. I typed a suicide note on my phone, and I was going to send it to a select few people. I took all the pills. It took about, I don't know how long it took. It took ages because there was a lot of them. And I sent my suicide note, but in my inebriated state, I accidentally posted it on Facebook, so everybody knew what was going to happen or what I was up to. And they all alerted the authorities. They went to my house, smashed my front door in, went on my laptop, saw that I'd been booking this B&B in Blackpool, and they came and got me. I was awoken by a paramedic slapping me in the face. And he was a big guy with big hands, so he really slapped the taste out of my mouth. They dragged me off to hospital. Uh, uh, poured charcoal in, and they got everything out, and it was it was a real bizarre time because of that, the mental health crisis team were watching me after that. They were around my house every other day. They were phoning me, all the time. And after this big downer, I started going back up, and I became more and more hyperactive and hypermanic, and then it got to the point where I was hallucinating, and it was complete psychosis. I was so high that my brain was running so fast, and I wasn't sleeping, and I was awake at about 3 in the morning after about 3 or 4 days of like not sleeping, and I was watching the television at sort of 3 o'clock in the morning. And every time I sort of moved my head, the image from the screen was staying in front of me. And then I realized, it's like it's not actually on the television; it's a product of my psychotic mind. So I phoned someone. I dial an NHS number. I forget what it is, but it's like, and they say, how can we help you, sir? And it's like, I think I'm hallucinating. Like, oh, what have you taken, sir? And it's like, no, I'm straight and I'm clear, and I'm seeing things that aren't there. And so when I gave them my details, they realised that obviously I was on the books for misbehaviour, and they said, look, can you get to the doctors at 8 o'clock in the morning? It's like, yeah, fine, okay. I thought I can manage until then, and I managed to get to the doctors. It was only down the end of the road from where I lived, and they had a consultant psychiatrist there waiting for me, and he had this big thick folder of all my sort of medical history, and he's going through it all. He says, "Well, why don't you tell me what's been going on?" And I started talking, and I kept talking for over an hour, telling him this history. But I was rabbiting because I could, when I get in those hypermanic states, I rabbit and I talk fast, and people don't really understand what it is I'm saying. And at the end of it, he just kind of folds his arm and he goes, "We think you have bipolar disorder. What do you think about that?" And I kind of went, "I don't know. I don't even know what it is, you know." uh, but and then he sort of explained what it was, where you have this condition where your moods can't be regulated without some sort of medical intervention, you know. And I said, "Well, okay, but can I get a second opinion?" And he goes, "Of course you can." And the next day, this is how good the NHS was back then, a consultant came to my house. A different consultant came to my house. We went through it all again, and he said the same thing. He says, "Look, you got bipolar disorder. This is a very dangerous condition, and you could probably die." And that's like, no shit, Sherlock. And then they put me on this medication called lithium, which is the sort of flag bearer medication for people with this condition. And 6 weeks into it, I was stood out the back having a ciggy. It was just again 3 o'clock in the morning, and I just thought, wow, it's so quiet out here. And this is 6 weeks into the medication, you know. I'm thinking, so quiet. I've never known such silence. And then I realized the silence was in my mind because the medication was starting to sit on this chaos. And that's when I sort of first started to come out of it a bit and start thinking and feeling like what standard humans should, you know, instead of all these excessively high and mighty emotions that because I was a very emotional person all the time, and you know, I'd get I'd get fixated on people and fixated on things and fixated on ideas, and I wouldn't ever be able to sort of take any criticism over it. You know, it's like I will not deviate from my path, and then all of a sudden this medication comes along, and it's like, ah, I see now. And sort of ever since that moment, I've been on a path of recovery for the last sort of 10 years or so, 10, 11 years. And then I met my wife, Zoe, and, you know, we got married, and I've had 2 relapses in that time that I've known her. The second sort of bad relapse put me in the mental hospital. So I was on a psychiatric ward for a little while, which I wrote about in the book as well, which is I met some wonderfully interesting characters. You probably heard the story about the one with the woman with the beard, but she was it was just the place is full of people like that. The Jean-Claude Van Damme guy who was convinced he was just convinced he was Jean-Claude Van Damme. You know, it's like, fine, but you look nothing like him, and you're probably about a foot shorter. So that was the basics of um, those are the basics of what happened, you know, regarding the illness anyway.
And was it hard writing about it, or was it cathartic?
No, it was awful writing about it. It was awful because I had to sort of include the reasons why I was inflicted with this condition, which was I suffered abuse in childhood, and I've never written about that before or spoken out loud about it, except to a sort of therapist. So I had to go through all that again, and that was really quite traumatic to do because it's like digging up a corpse, you know, and the corpse is not just lying there; it goes rah. So I had some sleepless nights when I was sort of doing that bit. Some of it was really fun because it's like I was remembering sort of pieces of my life, like working in a fruit and veg shop and stuff like that I'd completely forgotten about. So when you systematically start laying things out, you start sort of remembering these things and these people, and you know. So there's some really good fun elements, you know, and falling out the chippy when you're hammered, you know. So there's some. It was a really tough thing to sort of sort of dig up again, but it's like it needed to it needed to be done. I needed to sort of, you know, a lot of these conditions are triggered by traumatic events. So that's I had to sort of you have to include that, but you can't just say, well, it came out of nowhere. It's like no, there was a flashpoint that caused this malfunction in the old grey matter that led to all of this happening. It's,
And are you expecting to hear from a lot of people after it's released?
no, no, no. I don't like. I was very careful not to sort of use either real names or like even with talking about members of my own family, you know, like my siblings and all that. I don't use their names or anything like that because it's not really about them. It's about their sort of interaction with me, and you know, it, so I just sort of left that to one side. It's like, you know, I talk about my family, but not really too much in too much depth because you know there's not really a lot for them that their involvement in all of that what happened is not it's not it's not a big element. Do you know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
I don't even name them because like, it's not fair to sort of get them involved in it. You know, this is supposed to be a look at how a mental health condition can come about and get out of control very quickly. So there are one or two people that I have specifically named because they were really good people and they deserve to be immortalized. You know, like I had this friend called Stephen who was um, we did a like I say I've written about this as well, but we did a hospital radio show together, which was like when I was 18 years old, and it was just the most wonderful time of my life because we just did this radio show every Friday night. Me and this girl called Liz, who was again she's named in it as well because she's just an awesome person. Um, and we did this sort of Friday night radio show. Um, um, I remember first going to one of these shows. I just kind of saw him in town one day, and I'd not seen him since school, you know. And I was just walking through town, and there he was. And it's like, hey, I do this radio show now. Do you want to come along? It's like, yeah, all right. But we were given this list of things that we weren't allowed to say on the air. It's like, you know, you're not allowed to talk about death. You're not allowed to swear. You're not allowed to play any songs that relate to any medical conditions, right? Things like that. But it's like I was trying to think of to name a single song that named a medical condition, just so I could play it. Because if you give me a list of rules, I just have this. I just got to break the rules, man. And we ended up breaking the rules anyway, and it was made for a better show. But he's done really well for himself now because he works for Apple. He designs their camera phones. You know, the cameras in the Apple phones, the sort of new generation ones, and they're like really really good. And he's like, yeah, but he was always a genius. Like from the first day I met him, he was the kid that had a load of computers taken apart in his room, you know, and stuff like that. It's like you know he's going to be a genius one day, and he turned out. So he's living out in California now, with this really good job, having the time of his life. So it's like good for you. But you know, we were friends for quite a while before he baggered off.
And obviously, when we last spoke, I said about the funny stories, and you have included some of those, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
did you chuckle to yourself revisiting them?
Yeah, yeah, because you remember, you sort of put yourself in that place at the time. Like with the fruit and veg guy, the owner of the shop, who I got on really well with. He was a really kind, nice fella. He was a good boss. It's one of those rare people that was a good boss. And he would he was just an evil shot with a piece of fruit because he'd worked in the fruit trade for like 20 years. And we had this driver who used to deliver the fruit every day, and he spoke with this really thick Scouse accent. Yeah, right. Yeah, and he was spoiling the book here, but he would. He, my boss was called Paul, and this Scouse driver would come in and go, "Hey, has Paul told you why we call him Eddie the Eagle?" And I was like, "What?" He said, "Go and ask him why they call him Eddie the Eagle." And oh, go on then. And I went down to Paul. Hey, Paul, why do they call you Eddie the Eagle? And he goes, "Oh, Jesus Christ! Right? Is he bloody told you? He's bloody told you, hasn't he?" I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So he's like, "Right, come on." So we went back, into the back. And the driver's standing there, and he's like, and he's pointing at this driver. He's going, "Will you stop with that Eddie the Eagle shit? Otherwise, it's gonna be trouble." He goes, "Oh, he hadn't told him then." It's like, no, 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 nobody's telling him. It's referring to me. He goes, "Right, I'll tell him then. He was shagging this bird, right?" And at that moment, Paul scooped a pink lady apple and hurled it, like with absolute precision, and it hit the driver right in his knackers, right? And it just shut him straight up. Yeah, and the driver picked this apple up and he threw it back, like really pegged it, and Paul just went like that and he caught it. And then he threw it again. Perfect precision. It hit the driver in the knackers again. And he goes down on the floor then and he's rolling. So, and I'd forgotten about things like that, sort of working in this fruit and veg shop. But yeah, there's all sorts of stories in there. There's the story of how I wiped out the entire GCSE information technology GCSE workload off the whole server just because the teacher called me stupid, and things like that. So there's plenty of stories in there that sort of help tie this thing together. And then, of course, there's things like the first time I had a girlfriend and stuff like that, and you know, oh, it was a bit of a grueling time. But if when you look back on it now, you just go, man, you sad old bastard. you know. So.
Well, I'm just thinking, I can't bloody wait to read this book.
I thought it would be a lot longer than it actually is, but it turned out to be a lot shorter because it came in at about 55,000 words. But it's like I didn't want to overinflate it, so it becomes a bit meaningless. You know what I mean? So there's always the scope for more stories to sort of come out at some point. But I had to sort of combine it with this journey through the mental health and just sort of so you get little sort of signposts everywhere saying, here's a bit of tragedy, here's a bit of insight into mental health, here's a daft story, and then here's a bit more, here's another daft story, so there's plenty in there. Yeah. I sort of, when you'd said about writing a book of daft stories, it's like, well, how can I could use the narrative of this journey through mental health as a way to sort of spin this sort of these yarns together.
Because it doesn't feel that long. I can't remember when I actually interviewed you last, but it doesn't feel like it's actually been that long.
No, it doesn't feel long at all. I think it was about in March or something like that. Wasn't
I'll take your word for it.
Well, it was just before I published a book called The Second Coming. So I think that was back in March. I think, but I'd have to check my publication date. But yeah, it doesn't feel like that long at all. Been mighty busy.
Yeah. So that's even more impressive that you've managed to do all that in such a short space of time.
Yeah, well, I think it was like because people had asked me to do this book about mental health. I'd sort of written a few drafts of, little bits, but I couldn't ever sort of find a way to sort of make it work without sounding like a novella's worth of just misery, really. So it's like I didn't want to put that out there because it's just like I don't want it to come across as like self-pitying or anything like that because that's not how it's intended. It's just this is what happened. This is what it's like, maybe you know someone who acts like this, and maybe here's a reason why, So I didn't want it to be like a pity party. I just wanted it to be interesting and amusing and kind of tragic, if you like, because that's just the way it turned out, and the story has a happy ending because here I am. you know.
Indeed. And you get to talk to me again. What more could you possibly want?
Well, there you go.
And you got to meet John Richter as well, which was pretty cool, and Tales on Tuesday as well. So you have lots of people now who know who you are, at least.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And it's always nice to be known.
Yeah.
Some people
Even
go,
if it's
hey, that's that guy that fell out of the chippy.
I
Yeah,
will
that's
have you
me.
know, I was not responsible entirely for that. Just because I asked you to tell the story, I had nothing to do with the awards. They
Of
decided that.
course. That's your
They
story and you're sticking to it.
too bloody right. And you can't prove otherwise because they will stick up for me.
Of course they will.
They
Listen,
will.
I'll take an award any way I can get it. So even if it's through tomfoolery.
Did you put award winning on your book or was it too late by then?
I would never do that. I don't know why, but it's like I don't know. You get some people that do that. They put like stickers on the front of their books. I've won this award and that award and this award and that award. It's like, so does that make your writing better than everybody else's? Why don't you write a good synopsis? That would be a good idea. Maybe that'll draw people in.
I think Darren Walker has,
Yeah.
jokingly, but he's just a fucking nutcase anyway.
But yeah, I would never call myself an award-winning author. Award-winning plonker, perhaps. And my plonkery has won awards.
Well, at least something bad-ish has ended up in something quite cool. So
Well, it's going to be forever immortalized, isn't it? So
yes, whether you like it or not, absolutely.
there'll be a blue plaque over that chippy one day.
Yeah.
Brian O'Gorman fell here.
So now you've written that and that's coming out. Are you working on anything else?
Yes, indeed, I am. I'm always working on something. I'm about 30,000 words into a new story that started off as my attempt to write a sort of detective crime novel, and it's just not turned out like that. It's gone back to horror again. But that's just the way it goes. I just kind of write it, and I just think, oh, I wonder what we could do here to sort of mess with that up. So I wrote a book called The Water, which tackled the sort of zombie thing. So it's like I thought I'd always wanted to do something uh, based around the vampire legend, but I'd never sort of found a decent vehicle to sort of put it into. And with The Water, I tried to make it so it's not like anything else. Do zombies, but make sure it's something sufficiently different that it's not just the same old people hanging around derelict buildings and barricading themselves in, and then someone gets bitten, but they're on the inside, and everyone else gets bitten, and there's only one survivor left, they've got to run, and then they find someone and they want to steal all their stuff, blah 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 blah. Now, I had to do something different. So with this that I'm writing now, it is my take on vampire legends, but done in a modern day, but without all that sort of sparkling teenagers, in the sun. No, these are nasty, horrible, uh, soulless creatures that really want to prey on the weak and the feeble. But nobody knows that they're vampires, really. they can walk around during the day just as normal people, but at
Mm.
night they change. That's kind of the premise of it, and they there's little things about them. I don't want to give too much away because it's still in its infancy, this story, but there's things about them that sort of distinguish them from ordinary people, like maybe what their eye on. It the whole inspiration came from when if you go to a theme park like Alton Towers or something, and you see those people that sit on rides, and when they're going down these hellacious drops and all that, and they just kind of sit there like that, and they don't react. And I always found that really weird because everyone else is like, and they just sit there like, I feel nothing. And I thought maybe they're sort of creatures, maybe they're not human. And so it's that kind of idea that started ticking around as I was writing this story. So yeah, that's in the works at the moment. So uh, yeah,
Awesome. That sounds cool.
yeah. I hope it turns out okay. But like I say, I've about 30,000 words into it, and I haven't really done anything monstrously scary yet. So like I haven't killed anyone yet. Oh no, that's a lie. I had a body at the start. What am I talking about? Yeah, there's a dead body at the start, so it kind of sets the precedent of where it's going. But the working
That
title
was the campest Titan head turn I've ever seen.
was it? I know.
Sorry, I just had to point that out because it made me chuckle.
I'll probably win an award for that at some point, won't I?
I'll have to see if everyone else agrees when they watch it.
But yeah, it's got a title. It's called The Darkanoids, which is the Darkanoids was a story that I was working on at one point about 4 or 5 years ago when I was going into a hypermanic relapse, and I was writing this story. I was writing 10,000 words a day. That's how hyperactive I was. And it was a story about someone going back in time and sort of breaking the timeline, and these creatures come in, but it was so completely incoherent that it just there was no possible way I could formulate it into a good story. Because when I read it back when I was healthy again, I was like, what the hell is this? This is just 70,000 words of shit, and it's no good. It doesn't make any sense. But the creatures in it were really interesting. So I took those creatures and I put them in this new version of the story. So it's just to make them sort of vampire-like, but different. I'm not. They're not going to be, popping out fangs here and there. They're going to be something hopefully sufficiently different enough to be interesting. It's like, what can I come up with for this? It's like, yeah. I was talking to my wife about it the other day, and her eyes are going, oh, that sounds really good and scary.
How's the point of a horror?
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, so it's going to be called The Darkanoids, and God knows when it's going to be finished. Might try and get it out for Halloween, hopefully. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Maybe send it to a publisher or two. Gonna say, do you know any good ones? But
Why not?
are marvelous.
Actually, to be fair, QMP love horror, so they probably would be great. They would probably take it on. Jim especially loves horror, so
yeah, good for him.
Would you write about some of the other sort of horror stereotypes, I guess, like werewolves, and would you like to go through the whole, or would you like to be unique?
I think I'd just like to cherry pick the odd one, and be as I like to be as sort of original as I can be, because there are so many other sort of books that fall into these terrible cliches over and over again, and I always research them when I'm sort of looking to sort of add to the genre to see if I can do anything different with it or take it in a different direction or just make it more interesting, because it's like, how many vampire books are there out there, and all of them are like Twilight, and it's like, I thought vampires are supposed to be horrible and scary and unpleasant, and you know they're supposed to exploit people, and that. But then there's the other side of the coin, which is like, well, hey, you could live forever. You'd never die, and no one can ever hurt you. Can't go out during the day, but for most teenagers, they're going, that sounds kind of like my life now. So, but, but if you're an old fart like me and someone says, do you want to be immortal? I'd be kind of like, no, thanks.
Yeah,
No,
not really.
means I'll have to suffer for all eternity, wouldn't right? So, so, so it's kind of like, you got to get away from these sort of teenagery, oh, isn't it wonderful to have a boyfriend sort of stories, and let's get back to some good old fashioned nastiness, and and have a central character that's been traumatized by these creatures, and see what she's gonna do about it. Like, come on, let's go. So we'll see how it turns out. But if I see an interesting take on a genre that I can sort of visualize, then I'll probably have a go at it. But generally, I try and be as original as possible. It's just that certain things really appeal to me because I'm such a fan of these old-fashioned horrors. Bloody helicopter whirring about over our house. I don't know if you can hear that. It's Friday night, isn't it? So they're out robbing the shops again, I think.
Well, it's early, blimey.
Oh, they don't waste any time. They like to get it in before, do it on the way home,
Why waste a journey, I suppose?
Don't want to go home and get changed, do you?
Oh,
Bunch of
dear.
lads in here dressed in their Tesco's uniform.
The school uniform in our area, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Would you ever write with anyone else?
Don't know. Never been offered. So
You can
it'd be
ask.
one.
You don't have
No,
to be offered.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how it'd work. I suppose if you sort of took it turns writing chapters, then that'd be quite interesting, wouldn't it? I think if depending on who it was that offered, that asked.
Who would be your top person and who would you like to write with? If someone was to ring up tomorrow and say, would you like to write with me?
Well, for financial reasons, Stephen King. Yeah, that'd be good. For in the realms of realism, someone like John Richter would be good to write a story with because he's a little bit off the wire, and I like that.
Is a lot of this.
Yeah. But his stories are very, very outside the box, and I'm I haven't read The Warden yet, but I've got it's sort of on my list of things that I really want to read. But yeah, because he writes some really brilliant. Like Rabbit Hole was just so good, it was just and it was so effortless to read it, it was wonderful. So and I get on really well with John as well because we did a podcast together about we're talking about zombies and Dawn of the Dead and all that. So we did this podcast together, and I had an absolute blast because he's sort of on that same wavelength of just being really interested in all this stuff. And he's just a great guy. And if he offered to write a story, then us to sort of collaborate on something, I'd be like, man, I'd jump at the chance because someone like that. Phil Price is another one. He's another great writer that's he's just written. I read one of his. I've only read one of his books, which was Unforgiven, which I thought, and that was a vampire one as well. And he wrote with such grace and style that you could really sort of see yourself sort of fitting in with that. So he's another great writer. So there's lots of them. Helen Pryke's another. She's another great writer. Potentially Donna Moffat. Maybe she's a good writer. I don't know. I've not read a book yet, but
Yeah, you'd have to wait a little while. But yeah,
yeah.
actually, I think we'd have a massive laugh doing something because
it'd be fun, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Mine is horror as well. So because it's because it's young adult horror, then I couldn't chop a girl's arm off, for example. Apparently, that's not allowed in young adult. So I had to tame it back a bit. So yeah, I wasn't allowed to write.
These people not read Roald Dahl? Chopped bits off all sorts of people, didn't he?
Yeah, apparently it's frowned upon, so I just had to like just make it it's not as fun, but you know.
Listen,
Refuse.
I think a lot of sort of young adults probably go for the harder stuff anyway. They say, oh well, it's not suitable. But they're all like, my daughter read Stephen King at like 13 or something like that. She was already into all of that. She read It as well at 13, and that's a colossal book to read, And she devoured it, And then she was reading Edgar Allan Poe and stuff like that. So it's like, I'm so proud.
Definitely your child.
So yeah, collaboration would be great. I think an interesting project.
Yeah, I mean, I have read John's The Warden, but way back when it was called Amygdaland, and I had to message him and say, "Is it the same book that I read?" And it's like, "Yeah," but obviously changed and weirder. I was like, "Okay, cool."
I'm gonna invest in it very soon. As soon as I get a reading slot available, because I don't read massive amounts. I only read it at night, just before I go to bed. I'm not like these people who obsessively read all day. I'd rather be writing. But at night, just before I go to sleep, to wind my brain down, I'll read. And when I read something particularly good, like Rabbit Hole, that's when I end up staying up late because I'm like, oh, just one more chapter. And then it's like, no, I must ration it. I must not read it all. No, save it for tomorrow. And I got right near to the end of that book, and I was like, I'm going to stay up and finish it. And it's like 3 o'clock in the morning or some ridiculous hour. It's like, no, I'm going to save it.
It was exactly the same, and John loved it when I told him. Like, I had to stay up, I had to finish it, and it didn't matter that it was 2 or gone 2 in the morning,
Yeah.
and he was like, "Oh, that's the best thing ever."
It's just such a gripping story and so brilliantly written. I absolutely loved it. I've got to probably read it again at some point because there's very few books out there that are good enough to read several times. And I think that's one of them. I think that one will get better each time you read it because I think there's probably more sort of subtle things in there that you didn't pick up on the first time around. So that's a sign of a good writer. You see, they put stuff in that you don't really get until you read it again. So.
And it's funny, he's written a fantasy, and you sort of read Rabbit Hole and Auxiliary and The Warden, I guess, that are sort of sci-fi. And then this fantasy book he's written is so beautifully written. The language and stuff he uses, it's like, wow. Yeah, I can't believe this is the same person that's written really geeky techno things.
Yeah. He's got depth. See, I don't have that kind of depth. I just like, here's some beautiful scenery. Let's splatter blood all over the place and let's throw in a few monsters. I always write about characters. You see, I like getting a character's head and then make people care about the character and then do some nasty shit to that character. That's the way my sort of philosophy of writing is. Whereas John is like he can envision whole worlds. I just have to envision people because I don't think my sort of peripheral imagination will stretch to like a whole world. So I have to just focus on people. So I only sort of see streets and cities and all that when the character actually goes there. So, whereas he's got that ability to sort of stretch out and build a whole world for you.
Yeah, I think you'll like the fantasy one actually if he ever gets it published, and it's got like robots and giants and stuff, and it's like a plague-ridden world and stuff. So yeah,
that sounds good. Yeah.
It is. It's awesome. I love it. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, should get it out there.
Yeah.
Get it out there.
Yeah, I keep asking him occasionally. Obviously, I don't want.
I'll start mithering him and all.
Yeah, it will be fine. Yeah. He loves it. Yeah. Well, I don't think I have any more questions unless I can think of any really horrible ones to embarrass you. But I think I've done that enough last time. So
I don't get embarrassed very easily.
No.
I I don't embarrass easily. So it's
No, I suppose that ship's long sailed. Did it?
like, listen, when you've been subjected to as much public humiliation as I have, embarrassment does not come easy.
Yeah, likewise, actually, I don't. Even when I put my foot in my mouth, generally, I'm just like, again, all right then.
Absolutely, yeah.
I can't think of anything else to ask you, really.
Ah, well, I'm boring you already.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could talk to you all day. We've been speaking for hours already.
I know. That's crazy, isn't it? How time flies when you're having fun.
Indeed, absolutely. I wouldn't want to keep you from whatever it is that you were planning on doing the rest of the evening.
Well, I'm going to make a club sandwich for tea and then veg in front of the television, I think. And watch some, probably watch some really rubbish horror films, I think. I tell you what, we have been watching a lot of action films. You know, like when you see an action film on Netflix or something like that, or Amazon or whatever, and you see this film that you've not seen before, but it's got like a big action star from like the 1980s in it, like Bruce Willis or Arnold Schwarzenegger or something, and you go, oh, I've not seen that. I bet that's good. And then you put it on, and it's absolute rubbish. And the big star from the 1980s is in it for about 10 minutes, and then that's it. And they're gone, and they all the sort of performances that they do, they sort of phone them in. You know, there's no passion or interest in it. It's like, what the hell am I watching? We get normally me and my wife will get halfway through a film, and she'll be on her phone like that. I'm like, what do you think of this? Like, it's no good. Like, okay, we'll turn it off, put something else on. And then if we can't find anything, we'll go through the DVD collection. Yeah, yeah, put a Carry On film on or something.
All Carry On films, love them. Effective
Oh yeah.
then. Not going to break your virginity of watching football tomorrow when England play.
No, no, I don't do football. It's not my thing at all. If I'm going to watch any sport, it will be something like wrestling or fighting or some kind of something
Violent.
where people get it, you know, but in a controlled environment, obviously. I'm a bit sadistic. I'm a bit because my mother used to be a big boxing fan, so you know she was a when Frank Bruno was very very at the peak of his career, she was we'd all be around the television watching the Bruno fight, and when he won the world title, she cried. She was so happy. You know, it was like it was it was it was she was a big fight fan.
Yeah, yeah, I've met him. He used to come to
Oh
Petra Station I used to work in. He is fucking huge.
yeah.
Absolutely ginormous. My God.
And he has bipolar disorder as well. So, he's been a spokesman for
Yeah,
people like me for a while now. So,
yeah, he
God
used to
bless
come
him.
in and then he didn't come in for a while and then it broke that he was suffering and had
Yeah,
to break and stuff. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. But when he won the world title, it was a wonderful night in our house. I tell you, it was fantastic. And then because it went to like a points decision, if I remember it correctly. And then when they announced Bruno as the new world champion, it was like, let's get that dairy milk out.
Oh, those were the days.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, when it used to be like a big event, and it was on like ITV, it was on the big channels, before all this pay-per-view nonsense that we have now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's rubbish. They see this is a good thing about football. It's just on the mainstream. Everything else gets moved up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not asked because I don't watch the telly at night. We just put films on. We've always done it. It's like unless there's something like really pressing that we really want to watch, which isn't very often. Like we'll watch Casualty or something like that, but that's about it. Or Doctor Who, but even that's gone rubbish these days. But I just disgraced the holy god of sci-fi. But we usually just watch stuff on streaming services now because that seems to be the way it is, which is handy because you can pause it. If someone comes in to talk to you.
Just make sure Zoe doesn't watch Sex Life.
She's already watched it.
She's already seen it.
She's already seen it. She says she was a bit. We had this weird conversation about it. Yeah, she's going rolling her eyes. She's going on with herself. But we had this sort of conversation. It was the whole 50 Shades of Grey thing, where it's a story of a woman going after a bad boy, you know. Well, all bad boys are all good in bed and all this, and and then you have the sort of goody two shoes husband who, you know, he's not so good in bed and all that, and it's like, God damn it, it's so misleading, this, because it's like there are bad boys out there that can't get it up, you know. It's like, and there are good people, good men who, you know, are monsters in the bedroom, you know. And it was just one of these bizarre conversations that we ended up having. It's like, well, statistically, people are more enjoy their sexual encounters when they're in the confines of a good relationship. That's where the best stuff happens. It's not, you're not going to get all that rolling about in the hay with, you know, Mr. Bad Boy biker jacket, you know. It's like, so she sat through this whole thing, and she was she was so annoyed at the end of it. She's like, what the hell was that all about? It's like, fair enough.
Yeah. But the bad boy had a massive thing, so like massive.
Yeah, but that's all very well. It's all very well having a bloody nail if you don't know where to hammer it, you know.
Judging by the women on there, he knew exactly how to, but you know, who's to say?
I'm only saying that because I've got small genitals. No, but it's, yeah. It's, you need to know how to use your tool. It's not the size of it, you know.
Absolutely. And shall we end on that rather?
Shall we end on that rather filthy note? Yeah, I think we probably should before I say something I shouldn't.
So just to remind everyone why we're here, you know, the whole book and everything,
Yeah.
just, you know, so they don't go away thinking about hammering and tools and things.
That's gonna be the. We're gonna win an award for this at some point, aren't we? Oh dear.
I shouldn't encourage you either, should I?
Oh dear. It's gonna be the subject of conversation later on, I think. But she should be resting, you know. She's just had a tooth out, you know. Had surgery yesterday on have a tooth removed. And
No.
talking about that. Oh, it's a disgrace.
So come on, man, book.
Book, yes. The Man Who Loved Spiders, a memoir of mental health, is out on the 9th of July, which is my documentation of my journey through with a life with bipolar disorder, and some daft stories thrown in to make Donna laugh.
Oh, thank you very much.